Hey, so now we're at question number 6, if you're following along. And you asked, are there indigenous people in Cervantes or in Costa Rica? What other languages are spoken? Yes, there are indigenous communities in Costa Rica, however not in Cervantes itself. Costa Rica actually hosts a very small indigenous population as a whole. It's about 2% of the entire population has indigenous roots. And the two largest communities that I'm familiar with are called Bri-Bri, B-R-I space B-R-I, and they speak a language that is also called Bri-Bri, Bri-Bri, and they're predominantly located in southeastern Costa Rica and northeastern Panama. So they actually span two countries, and I know that their language is still spoken today. However, as with most indigenous languages, their numbers are ever decreasing. And I unfortunately don't know any words of Bri-Bri. I've never really come in contact with it firsthand. But I do know, as a fun fact, that I guess the Bri-Bri people just have a different concept of time and planning, or long-term planning. But they don't have names for the days of the week or months of the year in Bri-Bri. So contemporary Bri-Bri has now actually become a mix of Bri-Bri and Spanish for different reasons as well, I'm sure. But I know that if you ever want to express a day of the week or month of the year, you have to use that word in Spanish with your Bri-Bri. And I think the vast majority of the indigenous community that does speak Bri-Bri, sorry about the glare, that they also speak Spanish. So it's not necessarily that there's just this kind of quarantined indigenous community apart from Costa Rica. Then there's another indigenous community that's more in like the middle north-ish part of the country. That's called Maleku, and they also speak a language called Maleku. And the only word I know in Maleku is kapi-kapi, C-A-P-I, C-A-P-I. That means hello. And yeah, kapi-kapi. And they're even smaller than the Bri-Bri, and they're much more sort of on the brink of fading away, which is unfortunate. But sorry, such is the situation with the indigenous community. I think that covers everything with that. So I can go on to question number 7 right now. So what are the natural resources, and is their demand damaging the environment or affecting native people? Natural resources predominantly include crops for export. I know that's not like a sort of like water, timber, that sort of natural resource, but that is the main resource that damages the land, if anything. Costa Rica was actually recently in the news for good reasons, because they went so far in 2015. They've produced all of their electricity from renewable resources, such as hydroelectric plants from dams and wind turbines. So that's super cool. So actually Costa Rica is making a lot of good strides in becoming a very green country. As sort of a proud American, I would also like to point out that that does not mean that America is lagging behind Costa Rica. I looked it up, energy production rates, just out of curiosity, actually. And so it's really cool that Costa Rica is using renewable electricity, or renewable sources of energy to produce electricity, which is cool because I use electricity here in Costa Rica, so it's nice to know that my carbon footprint is a little diminished by using electricity here. But I saw that the Hoover Dam produces in 2 days the amount of electricity needed to power Costa Rica for 1 year. So, I mean, in their defense, they need to produce much less electricity in order to power their country. But it's good that they're doing what they're doing. So, as for how all of this would be affecting the native people, indigenous native, I don't know. By and large, for the people of Costa Rica, how is it affecting them? Obviously, I can't speak to all aspects of that, but one of the more salient ways in which Costa Rica's move towards renewable energy sources is affecting your average Costa Rican's life is that it is causing a rise in electricity prices. It's pretty ubiquitous in Costa Rica to hear Costa Ricans complain about the price of electricity bills here. I don't know exactly how much it is. I pay my host family a flat fee per month, and they take care of utilities. But friends, coworkers, host family, across the board, people seem to say that electricity bills are really high here. So there's that. And I think that's about as much as I can speak to natural resources in Costa Rica. One thing that is sort of interesting that I can't say with 100% certainty, but I have heard this before, is that it's really surprising when you come to Costa Rica how little seafood they eat here. Because we're a small country wedged between two big oceans, plenty of fish in those oceans, and yet they don't really seem to eat it here, except for a lot of canned tuna and canned sardines. Why might that be? I have heard that Costa Rica has sort of negotiated different deals with different Asian countries, Japan, China, South Korea, to allow them to fish in Costa Rica's fishing territory. Obviously, those countries would pay Costa Rica, and so a lot of the fisheries that would otherwise belong to Costa Rica are being used by foreign countries. Like I said, that may or may not be true, but it sounds like a plausible reason to me. Costa Rica has a lot of connections to China, in as much as China built the national soccer stadium in Costa Rica, and they built various bridges, and they've actually bought a decent amount of police cars in the country, which I find kind of strange. But there's a lot of sort of soft power influence from China coming over to Costa Rica. And this is really tangential from talking about natural resources, but a lot of that stems from Costa Rica's really interesting political position. It's been a democracy since the 1940s, and which is really awesome. Because Panama had a lot of problems with its allegedly dictator who dabbled in narcotics, Noriega. Then in Nicaragua to the north, they had problems with the Contra conflict, which was somewhat stimulated by the CIA. And then Honduras is always racked with some sort of problem. So Central America has had a lot of history of violence and political instability, and yet Costa Rica is sort of like this Switzerland in the middle. And part of the reason that I think Costa Rica is as developed as it is and has the close connections with the United States that it has is because it's maintained this democracy. And so throughout the Cold War, the United States made a concerted effort to make sure that Costa Rica stayed democratic, because being somewhat close to this hotspot Nicaragua and somewhat close to Cuba, they wanted to maintain a democracy in the area, which I think was largely, they made sure that it stayed a democracy through foreign aid. And now with the rise of China as a global player, I think they're also kind of trying to win Costa Rican government over, I guess, for economic trade partners, for things that I don't really understand. But Costa Rica, yeah, is sort of in this nice position where it's having two big powers trying to win it over, and so both the United States and China are just like showering it with presents. Costa Rica gets millions and millions of dollars each year in foreign aid from the United States, and Costa Rica does not have a military and has not had a military since the 1940s. However, they do have a contract with the United States that says that if any conflict occurs, like international military conflict occurs in Costa Rica, that the United States Army will come and defend Costa Rica. So even though Costa Ricans are very proud of not having an army, they really like to say that that's one of the reasons that they really love Costa Rica. I've asked multiple Costa Ricans this just out of sheer curiosity, like, oh, yeah, I see that you love Costa Rica. Like, why? What makes you so proud? 9 times out of 10, the first answer that they say is, oh, well, we don't have a military. And I'm always like, you don't have a military, but you have the United States Army to back you up. Like, what would you do were it not for us? But I just keep my mouth shut for that. in any case, Costa Rica, yeah, is in this interesting position between China and the United States. And that was a digression from talking about natural resources, but I kind of thought it was interesting, and hope you did too. So I'll end this this video on my tangents here, and we'll move on to the next question in the next video. Okay. Hasta ahorita.